Breaking news tonight: chaos inside the courtroom as Donald Trump was escorted out following a heated disruption during a high-stakes legal hearing. What unfolded inside the courtroom today was a moment few legal observers expected, but many now say was inevitable. Donald Trump, already under intense legal pressure, was removed from the courtroom after what multiple observers described as a heated and disruptive outburst during a critical hearing. While court proceedings are typically rigid, controlled, and silent, this moment broke sharply from that tradition, and it happened in front of attorneys, court staff, members of the public, and members of the press. Let's be clear from the start. Court records do not describe this as a physical arrest. However, court officers intervened and escorted Trump out after repeated warnings from the judge were reportedly ignored. And that detail matters. According to journalists and legal analysts present inside the courtroom, the tension had been building for hours. The hearing itself centered on a high-stakes legal issue, one carrying serious financial and political consequences for Trump. As arguments unfolded, the judge issued rulings that went sharply against Trump's legal team. That's when the atmosphere reportedly shifted. Observers say Trump became visibly agitated. He began speaking out of turn, reacting audibly to statements from the bench and making comments that violated long-standing courtroom protocol. At first, the judge attempted to regain control through formal warnings, a standard judicial step meant to preserve order and fairness. Those warnings, however, did not appear to calm the situation. Multiple accounts indicate Trump continued to interrupt proceedings, shaking his head, muttering remarks, and directly addressing the judge despite being instructed to remain silent. At one point, the judge reportedly issued a final warning, stating clearly that any further disruption would result in removal from the courtroom. Moments later, court officers stepped in. Trump was escorted from the courtroom as proceedings continued without him. The removal was swift, controlled, and carried out under established court authority. Yet the symbolism of the moment was impossible to ignore. A former president, standing trial, removed for failing to comply with courtroom rules. Legal experts say this is extraordinarily rare. Judges have broad authority to maintain order, but removing a defendant, especially one of Trump's stature, is widely viewed as a last resort. Constitutional scholars stress that such a decision reflects not emotion, but a determination that the integrity of the court must take precedence over any individual. As one former federal prosecutor explained, when a judge orders someone removed, it means the line has already been crossed multiple times. The fallout was immediate. Trump's legal team reportedly objected, arguing that their client was reacting emotionally to what they described as an unfair proceeding. The judge overruled that objection, emphasizing that courtroom decorum applies equally to all parties, regardless of political position, fame, or power. Outside the courtroom, reactions erupted. Supporters framed the incident as proof of bias and political targeting. Critics argued it demonstrated an inability to follow even the most basic legal standards. Social media filled with competing narratives within minutes, amplifying the moment far beyond the courthouse walls. But the consequences may extend well beyond optics. Legal analysts warn that documented courtroom misconduct can influence future rulings. Judges are required to consider credibility, compliance, and respect for court authority when deciding sanctions, enforcement actions, and, in some cases, sentencing. In other words, how a defendant behaves in court matters. This incident also raises broader questions about control, temperament, and decision-making under pressure, issues experts say cannot be ignored when courtroom behavior becomes part of the official record. Historically, courtroom removals are most often associated with defendants who refuse instructions, disrupt proceedings, or attempt to challenge judicial authority. Seeing such action taken in a case of this magnitude signals, according to observers, that the court is enforcing rules without exception. Importantly, the hearing did not stop. Proceedings continued in Trump's absence. Arguments were heard. Rulings were issued. And that detail could carry significant implications if appeals later claim procedural unfairness. Legal precedent is clear. If removal follows repeated warnings and results from a defendant's own conduct, courts have consistently upheld those decisions. As one constitutional law professor put it, you don't get to disrupt the court and then claim the process was unfair. There is noser. The political impact is equally significant. Images and reports of a former president being escorted from a courtroom are already shaping public perception, reinforcing narratives of chaos for critics and persecution for supporters. Either way, the moment adds another dramatic chapter to an already unprecedented legal saga. What remains certain is this: courtrooms operate on rules, not status. And today's events sent a clear message that no one is exempt from those rules. As Trump's legal battles continue, this moment may be remembered not just for what happened, but for what it revealed about the collision between power, accountability, and the rule of law. And the consequences of that collision are far from over.